to land, trying to get some gas. We understand we can't deplane our passengers.
Yeah, so this is something that, like I mentioned, that I'd never seen in my time in Arizona. United Airlines flight forced to land at Luke Air Force Base because it simply ran out of options. Last night's storm made conditions too dangerous to land at Sky Harbor. The runways were closed, and pilots had to make a plan mid-air as their fuel was ticking down to the minimum range.
Okay, we have 160 people on board, the fuel remaining 6.4, and they're telling me that I cannot land at Goodyear, not capable for our aircraft. So, where else would you suggest going, sir?
We have, like, over on the west side, there's not a whole lot more, because Glendale Airport is smaller, 7,150, 100-foot wide. You have Luke Air Force Base, but that's an Air Force Base. If you're an emergency, you're an emergency.
Let's go to the Air Force Base.
You do know you land at the Air Force Base. I understand your emergency. Once again, they are not going to let you deplane there.
That's okay.
United 2078 cleared to Luke Air Force Base.
Wow, it's still shocking audio. Let's bring in Chris Dunn, who is also a pilot, in addition to being our meteorologist here. Okay, Chris, what exactly is a ground stop? We had a ground stop at Sky Harbor yesterday. Right. What does that mean? Does that mean that planes cannot take off? They cannot land there?
There's a lot of confusion about that because we hear it a lot during the monsoon. There's a ground stop at Sky Harbor Airport. It just basically means that any airplanes trying to come into Phoenix are being stopped on the ground at their departure airports. So say if you're flying in from Denver to Phoenix, there's a ground stop in Phoenix, you're going to sit on the ground in Denver and not even be allowed to get in the air because, well, there's turbulence and you might have to hold, burn extra fuel. They just want to avoid that congestion and a traffic jam in the sky of all these planes trying to come in when they can't handle the same amount of traffic coming in. So a ground stop doesn't mean that the airport is closed. It doesn't mean ground activity is stopped at Phoenix. It just means other airports are not allowing flights to take to the air.
So I know that another plane was diverted to San Diego, and you say someone was diverted somewhere else. So how did this plane get into a position where it's close to, got so close to Sky Harbor that there are no other options for it? That's what I think is so interesting here and unusual.
Yeah, well, and legally they were not required to file an alternate destination because the weather has to meet certain thresholds. And so they legally weren't required to file an alternate. They had enough fuel to make the flight from Houston to Phoenix and have the required reserves. You have to have at least 45 minutes of reserve fuel when you land. And they weren't expecting to encounter this type of situation where they kind of ran out of options. They asked about Mesa Gateway Airport. There was a direct crosswind, a strong gusty crosswind at Mesa Gateway, so that was out. They asked about Scottsdale, that was out, kind of short. Glendale, also pretty small. Goodyear, they were originally going to go.
The size of a plane,
yeah,
right? So
yeah.
They kept ticking through the different airports. They're like, nope.
Exactly. Okay, what about them landing at Luke Air Force Base? That's a military base. You have a commercial flight going in. I can't imagine the protocol is set up for that to even be happening, especially on last notice.
Yeah, in fact, the flight crew admitted we don't have any of the approach charts for Luke Air Force Base because we don't plan on landing at military airfields. So they were asking for frequencies and asking for a visual approach and vectors to final to get them lined up to the runway. It's not a usual procedure. They were planning to go to Goodyear, which could handle a jet like that. But there's just not the infrastructure and the people and stuff in place to be able to handle all those passengers. And how do we get them out of there? And how do we fuel up? And how do we treat everybody?
Yeah, because you heard
eventually getting the buses and getting the people off.
Yeah, he said he knew that he couldn't deplane the passengers at Luke Air Force Base, but he still wanted
And
to
eventually
land.
they ended up doing just that and busing them back over to Sky Harbor hours later. But when you run out of options like that, the pilot in command has to look at what is the best option in this situation. I can't land here. I'm not supposed to land there. Luke Air Force Base. That's it.
Wow.
That was our best option.
Weird one, but everybody's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the key.
All in the name of safety.
Right.
That's the biggest thing.
Yeah,
160 people on there.
Yeah.
It ended up okay.
But
Thanks.
yeah,
Good
thankfully
stuff,
they're okay. Yeah, thank you, Chris. Okay, so at 1:30 this afternoon, that United Airlines plane took off from Luke and then landed at Sky Harbor shortly later. How long would that have taken? Like 5 minutes? A 7-minute flight. Okay, so the passengers we spoke with this morning said that they are still waiting to hear from United Airlines as to how they would get their checked luggage. Right now, the plane is in the air again, and it's headed back for Houston.
They left the luggage on?
How weird is that?
Luggage off?
You're in the city that you live in, but your luggage is lost somehow.
That was good. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.